Well, greetings, patrons and members. Here I am on Paul Gauguin. We're in the first island, which is Huani, and it's, of course, absolutely and totally magnificent. So what I'm going to be trying to do over the course of the week on Paul Gauguin is update you on what's happening, show you some of the islands, things that we're up to, and of course, depending on Wi-Fi, I'll either have to update these as we go, or they may have to be done afterwards. So we got on the ship yesterday, really simple check-in. You check in between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock. The ship only holds about 300 people. Apparently it's about 60% full, so really easy. You basically breeze on and you're basically through in your cabin. I'll show you a video of the cabin. Now this is done sort of in portrait form because I did it originally for sort of Instagram and stuff, but I'll take a look at the cabin and I'll comment on that in a second. So we're on board. This is our cabin. It's 7004. It's what's called a veranda suite. So it's actually bigger than the last suite we were on here, but it's very beautiful because the whole ship's been renovated in recent years since Patron bought it. So it has a queen size bed, which is a bit of a king size bed overall. There's Mark, who so far seems overall quite impressed with it. Impressed? Unimpressed?
I love it.
He loves it. He absolutely loves it. The bathroom, of course, because it's a small ship, is quite diddy, really. But I'm sure it's going to be quite magnificent. The one thing that I really do like, actually, on here is, unlike when we were on last time, because the cabin is much smaller, this has a really nice, big balcony for a small ship. So here for the next 7 days. Final word from Mark.
I think it's great. It's a really wide cabin, feels very spacious. Love it.
So as you can see, we really like the cabin. It's a bigger cabin than we booked last time. And since we were last on here in 2019, Ponant has bought the line and done a little bit of a refresh. Now this is a pretty old ship. It was built in the mid-1990s. So it's very distinctive because it was built specifically for the area. So whilst lines like Windstar sail here quite a lot, this is here all year round, and there's quite a lot of movement actually, even though the sea's not that rough because it's such a shallow draft, which is really important because you can get into areas like here, and later on I'll talk about Bora Bora, where this ship can get in, which many other ships aren't allowed to or can't get in. Food, of course, I remember as being amazing, so we had some incredible dinner last night. But what's interesting is looking back at some of the posts that I did then, it looks like the menu might be exactly the same. So it's possible that they keep the same menu. So I'll keep you posted on that. So today we're going to head out on our first excursion, which is going to be a cycle around this big island, 27 kilometers. So remember, if you have any questions about Paul Gauguin, any questions about the trip, leave them as comments. And in these little video updates, I will try and update you, and we'll see how that all goes. So here we're on Paul Gauguin and the very, very beautiful Huani island. We're actually today in a place called Tahana, and I'm currently recording this in Motu Mahana, which is a private island owned by Paul Gauguin. I'll talk about that more in the next update. So I want to answer a couple of queries and questions, but first of all, a couple of things that happened yesterday. So we went for a bike ride around Huani, and it was a 27-kilometer bike ride around one of the smaller of the two islands, and it was great because on e-bike, so we went up to the massive big hills, which of course you don't really feel anything because you're on your e-bike. Beautiful, stunning views because again you have this reef all the way around. That's a good thing, as I mentioned last time with Paul Gauguin, is you can go right inside these sort of reefs. A few other things that I didn't talk about yesterday that I thought about it. We had the captain's welcome reception last night, and of course it reminded me that everything on Paul Gauguin is done in two languages, French and English. So all the announcements are done in two things, although you know we only get an English daily program and so on, and I'll come back to the daily program in a second. The other thing which really struck me a lot is, because you really notice it, is all of the crew on Paul Gauguin, with the exception of the senior officers, which are French Polynesian, and it actually really creates a very different kind of experience. So of course we're all used to having Filipinos, Indonesians and so on as crew, and the French Polynesian approach to service is very different. It's very friendly, It's very chatty, lots of joking, and beautiful service. So kind of a relaxed service, but very friendly. It's a very, very different vibe to any other cruise ship, in fact. So that's pretty good. So now I want to address a couple of questions that I was asked. Thomas asked a question around entertainment. He asked around, do you get a daily program, a printed daily program, because there's only 300 people, and what's the entertainment like? So the entertainment approach is slightly different to other cruise ships. They have what is known as the Les Gauguin, which are a group, there's about 8 of them, who are all French Polynesians, and their role, they replace the entertainment team, and their role is to provide kind of an insight into Polynesian culture. So last night, for example, they did a series of dances. On the daily program, they will do things around some language, how to make garlands, dancing lessons, and so on. So that really replaces entertainment. The entertainment is not great overall, to be honest. So in the evenings, Ponant removed the casino from the ship, and the entertainment is so-so in the evenings. And what's interesting though about the entertainment is, in the evenings there's lots of groups of friends on here. There's also lots of multi-generational families. So actually in the evenings, even the evening entertainment is fairly poorly attended. So even the La Gauguin dance was not that well attended. I'd say maybe a third of the ship went to see it. And most people end up having dinners and chatting and drinks and that kind of stuff. Another great question I got asked was by Laura, hopefully I got that name correct, and she asked, because I mentioned in the first update that Paul Gauguin was the only ship that's based here all year round sailing, and others come in. So she wanted to know, are there any other lines that sail all year round? And there's a very interesting one which is called Aranui. Now Aranui is a ship which is 50% cruise ship, 50% supply ship or freight ship, and it sails much further and wider than Paul Gauguin does, and it does as it says. So you can go as a passenger, but they go around all the islands delivering all the supplies, and that's the main way that most islands get supplied. I would really like to try that. It's a really unique looking ship. They are apparently talking about introducing a more cruise ship thing, but I would really like to do that because it does sound like a very unique experience. Now Jennifer also asked me, having looked at what I was doing, is this a good cruise, and is the cruise line good for people with accessibility needs? And it's kind of mixed, I would say, because every time you come off the ship, you have to use a tender. So even coming to the private island, it was on a ship, a little tender boat. So you do have to tender absolutely everywhere. So that is an issue. There do appear to be a few accessibility cabins on board, so that is one option. But it's a relatively old ship, and I would say it's kind of mixed in terms of accessibility, because many of the excursions are hiking, snorkeling, and so on. So that's the update for today. If you have any questions, remember, leave them in the comments, and I'll answer them in future updates. But now it's time to go enjoy the private island, and more on that in the next update. See ya. Well, greetings from Moorea here for today's update, which is the third in the series. In this one, I'm going to answer a whole bunch of questions that I've got, but give you a little bit of update on where we have got to so far. So in the last update, we were at Motu Mahana, which was the private island for Paul Gauguin, and we had a great day there. There was a beach barbecue. The Les Gauguins did various demonstrations explaining how every element of a coconut tree is used. They showed us how to make garlands. We then sailed from there to Bora Bora. Now it was just a 3-hour sailing from there, and actually one of the things that's quite interesting on this itinerary is there's not a huge amount of sailing. So we spent 2 full days in Bora Bora, actually 2 overnights because we got there that night before. In Moorea, where we are now, we're also going to be spending 2 full days there. So and we're going to be overnighting here. One of the things that's really important about Bora Bora is it's part of a change that's happened in French Polynesia, where they're clamping down on the various ships. So ships of around 3,500 can't come into the region at all, and ships have to, Bora Bora will only allow 1,200 passengers per day to disembark in Bora Bora. So you have to be on a smaller ship. So that's really important if you're planning to come here. Now, in Bora Bora, on the first day, we went and did a snorkel, which was amazing. We snorkeled with sharks, which was pretty special. Then we went to another reef, which Mark described as the best snorkeling that he has ever done. So that's quite something to say. The second day, of course, reminds you that we were in the tropics, and it poured with rain. We had thunderstorms. We went to actually the private beach, but it was chucking down with rain. Went to the little town, local town, pouring with rain. So, as I said, we're now in Moorea, and I'll talk more about Moorea and what we've been doing in Moorea in the next update. So let's get into some of the questions. So Carol and Linnea had asked a little bit about the region, French Polynesia itself, and also asked a little bit about Paul Gauguin the lion. So French Polynesia, it consists of 118 islands, and they stretch for 1,200 miles. It's almost 2,000 kilometers, so it's massive. There's only about a population of about 200,000 across all of those, and about 75 or so of them actually have people living on them. In 1842, the French kind of took control of French Polynesia, so and they have controlled it ever since. So still today, it's sort of like an overseas protectorate. So justice, military, university education, for example, is controlled by the French. So justice, military, the police, that kind of stuff is controlled by the French still to this very day. In terms of Paul Gauguin has now been operating here for 25 years. It originally was part of the Radisson Seven Seas, which kind of went bust, then became Regent Seven Seas. So it was part of Regent Seven Seas for quite a while. They sold it to Beachcomber. Now Beachcomber is, they operate lots of tourist stuff here. So a lot of the Intercontinentals, for example, are operated by Beachcomber, and then Ponant bought it in 2019. So I was then asked what changes have been made by Ponant. So in March 2021, this ship went into dry dock in Singapore, and they made a couple of changes, a lot of them behind the scenes. So they switched so the engines can run a more suitable fuel as such. They changed some of the equipment like desalination and so on to make it a little bit more efficient, energy efficient, a bit more eco. They also have changed a lot of the senior crew. It's very clear they're all Ponant officers, like the captain, I think, has been with Ponant, I think he said since 2005, something like that. They then did a whole refresh of all of the cabins, all of the public spaces, working with a provider designer, which was called Philippe Noël, design agency, Jean-Philippe Noël, and so they kind of just refreshed it, and it does feel a much more cohesive, fresher kind of space. They did a few other things like added Wi-Fi into the fare. One key change they made, and Jeffrey actually asked this question, was around the casino. They removed the casino and made the piano bar much bigger. And I'll do a whole, after this, I'll do a whole tour of the ship and show you all this stuff. And he asked, does all the Paul Gauguin ships not have a casino? In reality, Paul Gauguin only has one ship, which is this one, the Paul Gauguin. When Ponant took over the line, they originally spoke about introducing two new ships, two hybrid ships, which were supposed to come into service in 2022, but nothing's been heard about those ever since, and no one really seems to know what's happening with those. So I'm guessing nothing's happening with those so far. So those are the questions, those are the updates for now. There's a couple of other questions that I will answer, including questions like why did I choose this over Windstar, which I'll talk about in the next update. So if you have any questions or queries, remember, leave those and I will answer them in the next updates. And thanks. So off to enjoy more of Moorea. Moorea is probably the biggest surprise of this whole itinerary. Bora Bora is the famous island, and yet Moorea is something very magical about it. It has magnificent scenery, and it really is, it just has this incredible vibe. So I want to talk a little bit about that in this update, which is the fourth that I've done from the trip, and also finish answering a whole pile more questions which have come in. Yesterday we were due to do an excursion, a Catajet excursion, but it was too windy. One of the things that I also came to realize in the tropics is it's quite a windy part of the world at times. So many things kind of get moved indoors or cancelled because of the wind. But it was actually a real plus because we ended up doing a hike up Magic Mountain. Now Magic Mountain, you may just see behind me there, is absolutely massively tall and huge. And we hiked all the way up there. The most incredible views once you're up there. Today we headed out on another e-bike excursion, which was really interesting because we went up to Belvedere Viewpoint, which is really magnificent. But one of the downsides is with the excursions is they're not doing enough to explain the kind of fitness level. So we had a whole bunch of people who really could barely cycle, to be honest. So it was kind of a frustrating excursion, but we did get to Belvedere View and we head up there, and of course we had all the magnificent views. So let me get into some of the questions that you've been answering. I have a bunch of them that I actually answered yesterday but didn't include. So let's take a listen to those first of all, as we'll do a little bit of time warp, change of clothes, and a slightly different scenery. Now, Sherry, Laurie, and Heike asked a few questions about the mix of people and suitability for solo travelers. So in reality, probably about, I would say, at least 80% of the people on here are English speakers, mostly from the US. There's some Brazilians, there's some French, there's some Germans, and so on. But it is very much English speaking. So even though they do things in two languages, and I guess that's also just a proximity thing. It's 8 hours or so from the US. In terms of solo travelers, I'm not sure that's great for solo travelers because, first of all, you have to pay twice, and it's already a really expensive trip. And again, in the full videos, I'll break down the costs a bit more, but it's a very, very, very expensive trip. And also, then there's no solo meetups, there's no solo hosting of tables. So we actually met a solo traveler on the excursion we did in Bora Bora, that snorkeling one. And she was saying, obviously it's very expensive, but she was finding it a little bit difficult as a solo traveler because there's so many multi-generational families, couples, friends. So it's quite hard to kind of break in. So I'm not sure it's great for a solo traveler unless you are genuinely happy to be kind of more independent as such. And she was saying, particularly in the evening, she was finding that more difficult because they don't do kind of the sharing tables thing. It's kind of a bit difficult because you are the kind of the spare wheel. A couple of people, including Jim, asked me a little bit about the dress codes. The dress code on the ship is what's called, on so many cruise lines, he said, country club casual. So in the evenings, you're not supposed to wear jeans, although it's a little bit vague on whether you can or can't wear jeans in reality. So it's kind of a collared shirt or a polo shirt, sort of smartish trousers, or that kind of stuff. During the day, of course, it's shorts, t-shirts. Now, many of you, including Victoria and a few other people, have asked, why do we choose Paul Gauguin versus Windstar? The itineraries are fairly similar. Both of them are kind of, relatively expensive options. We chose Paul Gauguin because we'd been on Paul Gauguin before, and we just loved the experience, loved its real connection with the islands. That's probably the reason why we chose Paul Gauguin. I think the differences are probably becoming fewer, but I'll tell you what I think the key differences that you need to really consider both of them have been in the region for a very long time. So Paul Gauguin is its 25th year. I saw it's Windstar advertising on their website that they've been around for 35 years. I guess it's a reaction to the Paul Gauguin promotion activity at the moment. Both operate small ships. Both of them are quite expensive because of the small ship experience, and also it's just very, very expensive being in French Polynesia. Paul Gauguin has the strong French connection, so it's a much more multicultural experience. So we have, a wide range, although, as I've already mentioned, it's mostly English speaking, but it is done as a much more multicultural, and of course, with the strong connection with France and French Polynesia, that sort of comes through. They have their own private island, they have their own private beaches. Now, I know Windstar do have access where they do some dedicated specific events in places, so you do get a similar kind of experience. I think if you're looking for a more American kind of experience, a more traditional Windstar experience, then I think that's a good reason for choosing Windstar. Hope you found these updates really interesting, and I will do a little poll to check whether you prefer the video to the kind of the written kind of bloggy style of things.